you start to question your value. You start to question your self-worth.
Like, the more money you got, the more successful you are, and most people really do buy into that.
But really, I just needed a break.
What I love is helping people.
I'm Julie Bauke, and welcome to The Evolved Career, a podcast where we help you determine what truly does matter most to you and how it can have a profound impact on your life. Today, it is my great pleasure to welcome Kristine Carlson. New York Times bestselling author and world-renowned speaker, she is passionate about spreading her message of returning from grief and waking up to life with more joy and gratitude, and certainly not taking life too seriously. Chris's life mission expands upon the phenomenal success that she and her late husband, Dr. Richard Carlson, had in their Don't Sweat the Small Stuff series. She continues his legacy of peaceful and mindful living through her own best-selling books, including the most recent, From Heartbreak to Wholeness, The Hero's Journey to Joy, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff for Moms, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff in Love, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff for Women, An Hour to Live, An Hour to Love, The True Story of the Best Gift Ever, and her memoir, Heartbroken Open. Over the past 2 decades, Chris and Richard have sold more than 30 million books worldwide. She's been featured on national radio and television broadcasts, including The Today Show, Good Morning America, The View, and The Oprah Winfrey Show. Chris's particular areas of expertise are focused on change, transition, and reinvention, and waking up to life with more mindfulness, gratitude, and joy. Wow, that's a mouthful, and that is quite a resume, Chris. Welcome.
Thanks, Julie. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, your story is great. I cannot wait to share it. Now, on my podcast, I love to help my listeners learn from people who've been to the place that they aspire to guide us to, and you certainly have. Many of our listeners are no doubt familiar with the Don't Sweat the Small Stuff series. Those 5 simple words are about as wise and timeless as any in our language. Although I want to hear all about you, I have to start with this question. I'm curious, how did Richard, or you and Richard, initially come up with the concept of Don't Sweat the Small Stuff?
Well, that's a great question. I like to say that Don't Sweat the Small Stuff was an overnight success story for Richard and I. It took 10 years and 10 books on Richard's part to come up with that book.
Wow.
So, he had been writing books on happiness. He was very much a pioneer in the field of psychology, because we're talking about 30 years ago. He was writing about happiness. He was one of the very first psychologists to really embark on that journey of happiness and to say, it's okay to want to be happy, and here's how you do it. And so, like I said, it was his 10th book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and it was actually called something different. It was going to be called a more peaceful, calmer you. And his agent, Patty Brightman, pulled the first chapter title out of the book and said, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff should be the title of this book. And thank goodness for Patty Brightman. I mean, did she earn her money on that move or what?
Yes, she did. Those 5 words, are so powerful. They're as powerful today as they've ever been. And you're right. Back then, you guys must have run into a lot of obstacles, even getting people to take the concept seriously. Now, you're right. Today it's everywhere. But back then, it was, that was novel.
The thing is, Julie, the world was facing a huge technological shift at that time. So actually, even though it was his 10th book, the way he wrote that book in the short, small chapters and how accessible the wisdom from each chapter is, and the practice of life, the way people practice life after they read that book, it really helped them shift in their lives. And I think that because of the title and because of the timing of that title and the relevance to that big shift in technology, people really gravitated toward it very easily at that time. Now, that is not to say that 10 years of work in his books prior to that weren't an uphill climb, because yes, he was talking about principles of happiness like thoughts, moods, feelings, separate realities, present moment living, long before it was popular to do so. And it used to be like he would stand in front of a crowd, or we would stand in front of a crowd, and people would just look at us like when we'd say, you are the thinker.
Yeah.
He would look at us like, what?
That's,
Whereas, you're right. Today, these principles of happiness and these principles are widespread and very understood. But it's because of the pioneering work that Richard did in his book series that they are. I mean, he really paved the way for a lot of great leaders and a lot of great psychologists to share their great work with the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about you. So I noticed that as I was looking at all of the books, all of this Don't Sweat the Small Stuff books and the calendars and everything that's out there, your name first appeared as a co-author from what I could see in 2001, a book that you published in 2001. All I'm sure, though, you were instrumental in some way in every book prior to 2001. What was it that caused you or allowed you to step up and claim your role?
Well, that's a great story. So, you're right. I would have been considered Richard's great muse and his life coach and, his great partner prior to 2001. And he actually invited me to write Don't Sweat the Small Stuff in Love with him. He was one of the very early authors to brand a series of books. He was right alongside Chicken Soup for the Soul. They were doing the same thing at the same time. So, so I said, oh my gosh, how fun, knowing that he would pretty much be writing most of that book. I wrote like 10 chapters and he wrote the rest of it while we had a great time as a couple, really discussing every chapter and marketing the book. He really did write the majority of that work. And then after that, the publisher was so happy that there were two writers in the household because, of course, his editor chimed into the publisher, the main people at Hyperion at the time, and said, Chris can really write. She can really write. So they asked Richard to ask me if I would write Don't Sweat the Small Stuff for women. And it was very interesting because I sat there across from him and he was really excited to tell me. He thought I would be absolutely thrilled. And I pretty much had the response of, wow, really? Do I have to?
Yeah.
And he basically said, no, you don't have to. But if you don't, another woman will have to write Don't Sweat the Small Stuff for women. And so, of course, that was a very smart thing on his part to say, because I was absolutely not going to want that to happen. And while I reticently stepped in, what was really beautiful about that, Julie, is that Richard knew something about me at that time that I didn't. Mm-hmm. And that was that I am a natural born writer. And when I sat down to really work on that book, I was like an otter taking to water. It was so beautiful and easy and natural for me to write. And then I had him right alongside me, coaching me on how to write the Don't Sweat the Small Stuff book series, and also write about things that we had studied together in this very new form of psychology that we had learned together. And so, it was just a beautiful experience, and that's how I entered the author world.
I love that because I think women, much more so than men, are more likely to react that way when asked to do something new or different or step up or step out. Oh no, me? Are you kidding? Who'd listen to me? I'm not qualified. Do I have to? I think, even if we don't say it out loud, I think that goes on between our ears. And,
absolutely. Absolutely. And I certainly felt that way. I felt like, wow, who am I to write this book? I said that. I said, who am I to write that book? I'm not a psychologist. And Richard said, yeah, but Chris, you live this stuff. This is different. This is a new way to write. You live this stuff. You're the perfect woman to write this book because you're my wife. And, and I did feel that way. And I think you're right, Julie. I think that is more normal for women to be reticent to step onto, a stage or a platform that they don't feel accomplished enough to do so. And I certainly did not, because I, had been a mom. I was being a mom and his wife for 5 years. My career had been on the back burner. And it was a big leap up to go from co-writing a book with him and co-marketing it to standing on the national platform that he had birthed, for me to stand there alone without him. And it was very scary. And I have to tell you, I had to move through a tremendous amount of fear to make it to that platform.
That's why we all need to surround ourselves with people who will kick us in the seat of the pants, just like he did you, to say, no, you can do this, and here's why. I think that's part of forming our circles of friends and colleagues that know us at our highest and best use and are going to challenge us. And you had one right under your roof, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, he really was an amazing
Yes.
partner, amazing person. And
Yeah.
I have to say, I was a really amazing partner to him too. For, he was the first to say that he wouldn't be doing what he was doing without me along at his side. And so, yeah, we had just an amazing
Yeah.
marriage. I was very, very blessed.
Well, your book, From Heartbreak to Wholeness, absolutely, I must say, everybody listening needs to get this book. It was a fabulous book. And what I love about it is it applies in so many areas of our lives. We generally think of heartbreak as someone dying, a divorce, a loss like that. But every day we have so many losses in our lives. And, in my world, I work with people who lose jobs and careers, and I see that devastates them to the point that it's hard for them to get back up and keep moving. And the concepts in From Heartbreak to Wholeness, I think, can be utilized in every area of our lives. And so, for me, I absolutely learned so much from that book when I went through some personal things for myself. But I have continued to recommend it for people who've lost something significant to them or someone significant to them. And one of the things that occurred to me when I was reading this is, as a culture, we love happiness and good feelings, and everything in our culture is about finding ways to live happy, which is great. But when it comes to loss and despair, most of the advice is just ways to get happy again. And your book is the best I've read on not dealing with it, but stepping into it, welcoming it, embracing it with an open heart and mind, and being open to the lessons. In my experience, those emotions denied do not disappear; they just fester. And I learned the hard way. I know it's also easier said than done. So thank you for writing that book. And I think it was 2016 it came out. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Richard had been gone for 10 years by then. What made that the right time to write the book?
Oh, yeah. No, yeah. I think it was maybe 2018.
Okay. Was it? Okay.
But yeah, it was 2018. But, I had been writing about and speaking about how to be resilient and how to step into life after loss for so many years. And I had written the Heartbroken Open, a memoir through loss to self-discovery book, which was a very early book for me to write in my grieving process. And, it's so funny because so many of my friends said, oh, no, don't write another book in the grief genre. And I said, well, this is really going to be in the grief genre. This is going to be in the life genre. But of course, as it was categorized, it ended up in more the life and loss category. But, I just felt really deeply called to write about everything in a way that would lead people on a transformational journey. And I had been working with so many, especially women that had gone through big change and big transition in my What Now program. And I just thought, what, this is what the book that's calling me. And I think, I now have a program called Birthing Your Book with Deborah Evans. It's called bookdoulas.com. And I, in that program, talk a lot about with people that they should write the book that is really calling to their heart and soul, and not always write a book for profit, but write a book because it's the one that is there. It wants to be birthed so bad you can't even stop it. And that's why I wrote that book, is because I knew that I knew something about what it meant to be on a total transformational journey, and I wanted to put the depth of my wisdom into one book. And that book is basically the culmination of 10 years of experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So some of the quotes in your book, I'm highlighting the heck out of it and all these brilliant thoughts that I want to share. And, in the blink of an eye, I went from an envied woman to a woman who was pitied. December 2006. Walk us through that day.
Yeah, so on December 13th, 2006, that day started out like an ordinary day for me, like it does for everyone. I was in my car, I was finishing up some Christmas shopping, and my husband had gone on a trip to New York to promote his latest book on a book tour. And so I pulled my car into a mall parking space, and the phone rang, and I looked down, and it was an area code of New York. And I thought, oh, that's weird. Richard must be calling me to let me know he's landed safely. And when I picked up that call, there was a nurse and a doctor on the phone, and they identified themselves. They identified me. They asked me if I was in a car, and I said yes. And they said, "Are you parked?" And I said, "I am." And they began to fire a lot of questions at me, and it really put me on that sense of alarm, like who the heck are these people? Why are they asking me all these questions? And then they said, "Are you Mrs. Carlson?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Well, we have Dr. or Mr. Carlson with us here at the hospital." And I was like, "Well, that's impossible because he was on a flight." And they said, "Yes, something happened on that flight." And I was just suddenly like, "Well, what do you mean? How is he? Is he all right?" And they just immediately said, "No, I'm sorry to inform you, Mrs. Carlson, that Mr. Carlson has expired." And that word is actually widely used.
Yeah, is it?
It is, but it's such a hard word, to hear over the telephone from complete strangers, and also to wrap your head around. Here I am, 43 years old. My husband was 45, and I'm sitting in my car, and I hear that word, and I'm like, expired? Like, what are you talking about, expired? I mean, I really started yelling, and I really thought these people had called me to play a horrible joke on me. And I asked them when, and they said about an hour and a half ago. And then I just knew. And I've never left my body like I did in that moment. I completely left my body.
Mm. Wow. One of the quotes in your book, "The queen of all, Oprah, said to you, 'Chris, do you think Richard's death has given you the gift of feeling your life?'" What was your response?
Yeah, I remember that moment so poignantly as a very pivot turn for me. And I remember putting my hand on my heart. I was holding my heart because it was seriously, I felt like there was still a hole in it, and it was in so much pain. And I remember looking at her and just nodding and saying yes. But it was later that I really processed that as being the largest pivot that I would make onto my hero's journey, because I realized that this is why this has happened. And I often say to people, there's that saying, everything happens for a reason. And I'm like, no.
Right. Yeah.
Nothing happens for a reason, but we find the reason why things happen, because we have to make sense of it in our own lives in order to move forward. And so certainly in that moment, she brought something home to me that I was getting awfully close to realizing, but that this was the greatest gift that Richard could have given me among many of in our lives together. But in his death, he gave me the gift of really feeling truly alive and really open, really awakened.
You said you looked back and said, I wasn't living my life fully alive before he passed away. What a wake up call that must have been, or what a thought that must have been.
Yeah, well, I think that's what happens to people when they get crashing, life-shattering news. They realize that there's just things that come into perspective about the way you were living, because you can never return. You will never return to the life that you had after going through a life-shattering loss of any kind. And that's kind of one of the biggest struggles people go through, is they want to go back. They want to go backwards to the life they had, and there's no possible way that's ever going to happen. The only possibility is stepping forward. And you're not moving on, but you are moving forward. And that's the only possibility, because that's what time does. Time doesn't stand still for us. We have to move forward in time, and we will, no matter what.
Yes. And it'd be a great bow we could tie up and put on this package if we could say that from that moment on, everything was puppies and sunshine.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
Yeah. But 11 months after Richard's death, you were plunged into what I would say is a hellacious 7-year odyssey that tested you in all kinds of new ways.
Yes, I really was. Well, I dealt with a real troll, a real menace to my family, to my life, and it was awful. It was horrific. We were being stalked by somebody that I had met on an airplane and had a conversation with in a very open state of mind and open place in my life, just 11 months after Richard had died. And he turned out to be a very serial stalker kind of personality type, and just very emotionally damaging to my family and to my brands, to myself personally. And we had to deal with that for a very long time. But I like to say that the way I processed that was the healthiest way I possibly could. And that was, again, I go to the principle that life happens for us, not to us. And so you can be a victim, and certainly people will target you, as I might have been targeted as a victim. But I would not relent to being a victim. I just decided that the best way to look at this was to ask the question, how did this, as awful as it was, as much as I didn't invite it and didn't want it, how did this serve me? And I think that's the best we can do sometimes when we're dealing with something really horrific. We have to find that place of how did this move me forward in my life? How can I forgive this behavior of somebody and let go of it so that it doesn't impact me in a damaging way? And then how can I look at what did this do for me? And that particular incident really brought me into my hero's journey, because that was the dragon. He was the obstacle that I faced in stepping into my brand and stepping into being more the male and female role in my family. I had to be the great protector, which is very much the hero. I had to protect my girls. And so in that way, that situation served me well. Now, would I have liked it different? Absolutely. It was horrific. I don't even want to talk about it in any more detail, but
yeah.
It was terrible. So,
well, 7 years, 7 years of anything, will change you in ways that, like you say, when you can look back, you can look in the rearview mirror and say, I'm a better person in all of these ways before I went through that. But there has to be easier ways I could have learned that same lesson, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah, you would think so. But the divine, I always say, doesn't come in a box of chocolates,
No.
Divine has different ideas for different people, and for me, I've lived a very big life. And so it didn't surprise me. On some level that this archetypal male, kind of bullying, kind of trying to overpower the feminine, didn't come out in this way in my life. So it is what it was, and I've put it past me. I've put it behind me, and I don't look back to that time because it served me.
Yes.
And I don't invite it. I don't look back, and it, and I will say it served me.
What's the biggest difference between you pre that odyssey and post that odyssey? What do you think is the biggest difference in how you live your life or approach the world?
I've had a lot of that among many lessons of discernment, I would call it. Learning to be discerning, learning to approach my world with a lot more protectiveness, and integrating more masculine qualities. I was an incredibly feminine woman and still am, but I had lived a life of being traditionally feminine by a man who really held the great protector role and the great provider role and a lot of roles in my life. And so after his death, I had to find those aspects in myself and integrate those so that I am a much more whole and complete woman today because of these things, because of picking up the reins of the brand, because of dealing with obstacles along the way, because of learning how to be discerning in all sorts of areas of my life, from how to invest my money, to how to live my life, who to trust, what information does somebody need? What do they not need? Just things like that. I'm just far more discerning.
Sure. And that's, and that's, in these times, that can only serve you well. And I'm sure your girls learned that as well through the process.
They've always been a lot more discerning, actually, than I have.
Well, it's good to have them looking out for you.
They don't trust people as readily as I do.
Yeah, I can see why. So, one of the things that you talked about that Richard asked you one time, and I think it sounded like it was the basis for one of your collaborations, was the concept of an hour to live and an hour to love. I think that, to me, that really struck me as I was looking at all of your materials. And I think in this world we're in right now, when we're all, going through the coronavirus pandemic, I think we're all, our heads are spinning in terms of, what really does matter. And I'm hoping that we're all going to come out of this in a new normal. But what's the concept of an hour to live, an hour to love?
Well, it was a gift that Richard gave me on our 18th wedding anniversary, and he answered the question posed by Stephen Levine from his book, A Year to Live. If you had 1 hour to live and could make one phone call, who would it be to, and why are you waiting? And Richard sat down one day and answered that question and wrote me this incredible 37-page love letter. Not only to me, but to our girls. And, it's so funny because when he gave it to me, I felt really awkward because all I had was a card.
Yeah.
But then again, he was a writer. So it was so beautiful, though. And I just remember it was 3 years prior to his death that he wrote this. And I remember asking him, like, did you go to the doctor or something? Did you get some news?
Yeah.
And he said, no, I felt compelled to write this. And he had told me at one point that he had hoped that someday it would be shared with the world as a beautiful tribute to our love. And so after he died so suddenly, one of our book agents, our international book agent at the time, said, you ought to really publish that back to him as a tribute, a national tribute. And so I was like, oh my God, I have to. So I did. And it was really weird because I had this very, very strong feeling. In fact, I could see it. I had this vision of sitting with Oprah on her couch. And it wasn't like I wanted it, but I knew that Richard, if he could have had his pick about where to have a national tribute, it would have been on Oprah. And so it was so amazing how that all transpired. I mean, it was just incredible because we sort of slipped in on the lower rungs of the production line, which is what you do on Oprah. Like, that little manuscript wasn't even out yet, and it went into their production people, and some basic production person on the low level read it and thought it fit really well with Mitch Albom's book that was coming out as a movie called,
The Tuesdays with Maury?
No, it was called A Year to Live, I think, or something like that. Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
And Oprah was producing that, and we, he said, "Oh my God, this is perfect for this, to go with this movie." And then they were going to bring other people on to answer that question. If you could spend a day, one more day was what the movie was called. If you could spend a day with your loved one, what would you do? Well, then they realized, because Richard was such a prominent author in Oprah's life, and they realized who we were, and so they brought us on, and we ended up having a total tribute on that broadcast. It was the 20 minutes devoted to Richard, so it was beautiful.
Wow, that's when you think back to the Chris of the late 90s, when you're a young mother, and literally your job was raising your children, supporting Richard. That Chris wouldn't even recognize the Chris today.
No, I don't think Richard would recognize the Chris today.
I was going to ask you that next. What would Richard say
about? He would really love her.
Yeah. Oh, he's so happy. He's so proud.
He is.
Yes.
I know. He's very much a part of my, he's very much in my field. Even today, 13 years later, I don't wake up a day where I don't think about him.
And the work truly is timeless. And so if you're listening to this and you're of the generation where you didn't get a chance to experience Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, I am certain that every word in these books are as relevant as they were back then. So I highly recommend that you pick one up. So are you ready for 2 questions, one deep and one shallow?
Sure.
All right. We'll do the shallow one first. If your family and friends heard that you've been arrested for something, what would they assume it had been for?
Oh my goodness. What would it be for? Wow. Oh my God. I don't even know. Let me think about that. What first comes to mind is that I can sometimes say something uncensored. So I was thinking, probably some sort of lewd content.
Okay. Lewd and lascivious conduct in public.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking. I mean, it's certainly, I can't really think of anything else. I think that would probably be it. It would be just to say something really outlandish or outrageous at the wrong event or something. But yeah, that's a great question though.
All right. And our final question, what breaks your heart?
Oh my gosh. I think what really breaks my heart is to think about a couple of things. I all the charity work that I do is in regards to kids and children, and always has been, about how to make their lives better. And I get really heartbroken when I think of, during this time of COVID-19, that while I inspire people to really make the most of this time and empower them through this time, that there are children that are in alcoholic homes and that are experiencing a real negative time period. Some children are in poverty. They don't have the meals that they get at school. And that's the kind of thing that really breaks my heart, is that when children suffer unnecessarily, that's the thing that
Yes.
that really hits my heart at home.
Fantastic. Well, is there anything I've not asked you that you feel like you want to share to anybody listening looking for some extra hope and inspiration?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that it's never too late to have a new dream that, we all go through. I've never met a 50-year-old somebody, whether they're male or female, that haven't gone through something big. And yet it's never too late to spawn a new dream, and to remember that the circumstances of life don't make or break you, but they reveal who you are. They reveal you, and they can reveal everything about you to yourself, and that the journey of self-awareness is one that is powerful. And yeah, just to know that you can stand at the precipice of change, and you can dare to ask yourself to dream a new dream, and you will at some point.
Yes, the choice, as you say, between bitter and better. Chris, how can we learn more?
Well, first of all, I would like to invite your listeners to go ahead and go to FromHeartbreakToWholeness.com, and they can download the imagery, guided imagery meditations that go with the book. So that's the first thing. And then if they want to find out more about me and my podcast, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, Live the Big Stuff, they can go to KristineCarlson.com, and that's Kristine with a K. Thanks, Julie.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for taking time today to join us and give our listeners a dose of much needed inspiration. As I said at the beginning, the best people to guide us and to advise us on our journey are people who've already walked that journey. And you certainly have. You've had more than your share. So keep it up. You are certainly an inspiration to me, and I have a feeling you'll be an inspiration to a whole new generation of folks.
Thank you so much, Julie. This has been wonderful. Great speaking with you and your listeners.
If you enjoyed meeting the Evolved Careerist on today's episode, well, we've got a lot more lined up for you. Subscribe, tell your friends, rate us and write a review. And of course, follow us on social media. But if you're interested in learning more about how you can evolve your career, you can contact us through theevolvedcareer.com or thebaukegroup.com, and that's Bauke. Do you know somebody who'd be a great guest, who has a great career story to tell? Or do you think you qualify? Then email me. My email address is in the podcast description. Until next time, here's to your career happiness.